Welcome to some more stories, tales of transformation that have been inspired by being outdoors. My name is Marianne Rowe. I am a founding teacher of Monterey Bay Meditation Studio and a psychotherapist in private practice in Pacific Grove, California. Over the past few years, I've had the good fortune and the blessing to meet a number of extraordinary people who have extraordinary relationships with the outdoors. Whether working as a scientist, a researcher, an educator, an artist, an attorney, or an environmental activist, each of these individuals engage their heart and spirit, as well as their mind, in their work. Brings a sense of reverence, reciprocity, compassion, and service, as well as a profound understanding of interbeing into their relationship with the world outdoors. And each has a story of being transformed by the outdoors and has graciously agreed to share this story with us. Sitting by the campfire for some more stories this morning is Professor Dan Fernandez. Dan is a longtime professor at California State University, Monterey Bay, where he teaches physics and environmental studies classes. Dan has a passion for sustainability and helping humanity ensure conditions for our ongoing survival and quality of life. In addition, Dan is a fog researcher. He is studying and developing ways of gathering water from the mist. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Marianne.
I'm so happy and appreciative of your joining us to share how you have been inspired and transformed through your relationship with the outdoors. Respect to the original indigenous inhabitants and stewards of the land that we live on, we begin our conversation with a land acknowledgement. Whose traditional lands are you on, Dan?
I'm on lands that were traditionally lived on by the Ohlone, Costanoa, and Esselen nations.
Mm, beautiful. So, Dan, from our previous conversations, I've been touched by your strong reverence for the earth and all her beings, as well as how you've been inspired by the mysteries that you've been called to explore. You engaged with the outdoors through your work and through your play, and are dedicated to conscious stewardship of the environment, as well as being committed to sustainability through individual and community action. And I'm curious about the original seeding of your story of your profound relationship with the outdoors and with the earth. So I'd like to start with, what were you very curious about as a child? And how has that curiosity been part of your relationship with the earth and with the universe?
When I was a child, I was always wondering where I came from. Why am I
Mm,
here? Why is everybody here? What's the purpose of it all? That really, I'd say I was curious about it and I struggled with it. I often wondered, what's going on? What's the point of all of it actually?
mhm,
So it was even more than a curiosity. It became kind of an obsession and
mhm,
a question which bothered me. I would say it actually bothered me a lot,
mhm,
and I could never
mhm,
quite figure it out. But I'm still
mm.
working on it. Bothers me less. I've come to accept it, but I'm still working on it.
Mm, I'm appreciating how that sort of discomfort. It's like an itch that you want to keep scratching, and it just keeps having you lean in to explore deeper and expand your field wider to understand what's driving all of this. And I'm wondering, was there a human or a more than human who introduced you to the mystery and the wonder of the outdoors, or helped cultivate your or encourage your curiosity? And if so, how did that occur?
Definitely, I think my parents had something to do with that. My mom, I remember we used to hang our clothes out. Keep in
Mhm,
mind, this was in the 70s when I was a kid growing up. I was born in
mhm,
the 60s,
mhm,
and she'd be hanging our clothes outside. I don't know how many other neighbors did or didn't. I don't remember that.
mhm.
But she said, I appreciate how fresh it is and it uses less energy. And so that was an
Um,
interesting thing. And I remember telling my friends, and they're like, or no, they were actually making fun of me because they saw something, they were visiting or playing at my house and saw something hang on the line, my underwear or something. And they're like, oh, your
uh-huh.
underwear. And they said, my mom, they're like, we dry ours in the dryer. So it's this kind of, there's a distinction between the inner and the outer there.
Yeah.
You know, what's
Yes.
going on in the inside, what's going on in the outside. And I remember having philosophical kind of questions with my mom, like, you know, what's the point of anything? Why are we
Mm,
doing this? And she would definitely try to put a positive spin on it. Uh,
mhm,
I'm not sure my curiosity was satisfied, but at
mhm.
least she had a positive spin on it. It wasn't like, oh yeah, everything's just a real drag. There's no point of anything. We're all going to die anyway. I didn't get that. But I
Mhm.
felt that sometimes, like, why, what's going on during this time
Yeah.
that we're here?
Yes, yes. Hmm. So, it occurs to me that at some level there was a searching for purpose and a searching for meaning from a very, very young age
Yeah.
that just continued and continued.
Yep. I think that's a very fair assessment.
Mm,
Mhm.
mm.
And I also grew up, my parents, just a little bit of background. My
Yes.
mom's of Jewish background. My father
Mhm,
was of Spanish Catholic background.
mhm,
They married in a time when such unions weren't common, and they were the
mhm,
first in their family to do that. Now it's quite regular.
mhm.
So I was the product of that, the first product of that. And
Yes.
so they brought me up in the Unitarian Universalist
Mhm,
tradition church. So I
mhm,
was basically born into it. And
mhm.
in that tradition, there's a constant striving for trying to really understand and learn. And there's a lot of beliefs that are accepted in terms of how people want to
Mm,
believe how it is. But there's
mhm,
also the acceptance of exploring what
mm,
is going on around us. Is there a
mhm,
God? It isn't
mhm,
taken that everybody believes that there is a God, but
mhm,
that's some
mm,
people do and some people don't who attend that tradition. And
mm.
so there's that element as well. So there's the freedom to do that exploration, to ask those questions.
Yeah, yeah, yes, and to I love how that, your parents and also the spiritual tradition that you were brought up in was cultivating, welcoming that curiosity and that discovery, and, mm, the diversity of the field that an appreciation of diversity in the field. And I'm wondering how that, particularly in your work with the world outdoors, that sense of diversity in the field, how that has surfaced in your thinking, your perspective, your teaching, the work that you're doing.
Probably in a lot of ways. One is that we're humans, and I think every person, every species tends to be somewhat centered on themselves to some
Mhm,
extent. Like
mhm,
for our first consideration is, we got to eat to survive and to take care
mhm,
of ourselves, and so that I think that's natural to some extent. But
mhm,
realizing that there are other creatures and plants and animals that we depend on for our survival as well. We're all part of a coherent web. We're
Mm,
not just going to be able to do it by ourselves.
mhm,
We're counting on these other species that we can't necessarily talk to in the language that we know, that we talk to each
mhm,
other in, but that we have our own uh, interconnectedness
mm,
amongst each other, and that's as true within the human species as well. There's a lot of different people here who
mhm,
contribute in different ways to the whole. Just like in the world, there are a lot of different species of plants and animals and fungi and all these other nondescript things that aren't classified the way we used to think
mhm,
we could classify them, that are dependent upon each other.
mhm, mhm. And it's in that diversity that the richness is I happen to know one of your key words is systems
Hmm.
and how the system works and all of the intricacies of that.
Definitely. Definitely.
Mm,
We're all part of a big system, many different systems actually. But
yes.
yeah, depending on what we think of as a system, but there's many of them out there
Mm,
where there's a
mm,
lot of different parts that are interacting with each other. And there's a common purpose. In this case, I could say it's survival or flourishing
mm,
or
mhm,
continuing.
mhm,
Hmm.
mhm. I wonder, Dan, if there was a particular event um, or a series of circumstances that that just deepened your relationship with nature and the systems and the intricacies of all of that. That
Sure, that's a good question. When I was a kid, we were not, my parents, they liked being out, they liked walking, they liked being outside. My dad, biked a lot. They still do. They're
mm-hmm,
still alive, doing quite well. Probably
mm-hmm,
because they are so active. So being
mm-hmm,
active was
mm-hmm.
important to them. It became important to me too. Uh, but we're not campers. They did not like camping. The one time we went, they thought it was, I remember when I think I was probably about 4 years old. It was the one time I ever camped with them. And we went one night with friends who did everything. And they just said it was so much work for so, and so we never did that, but we liked being outside. So my, their idea of a great vacation was to rent a cabin in the woods. So you weren't camping. You still had cook stoves, you still had running water and all that stuff, but we were in nature. It was beautiful. It was in Cape Cod, beautiful place. We went there every year, gosh, for probably 15 years. Even after I graduated high school, they kept going once they found this place. Uh, so for years and years and years, we went there every summer, and we'd go to the beach and we'd, you know, explore beautiful areas there. So there was that. And then later, at one point, I was never very athletic in elementary school, particularly, but I was always looking for, what can I do? Where's my place? And at one point, I think I joined the track team when I was in eighth grade, and I wasn't good at anything in track. I couldn't jump very high. I couldn't jump very far. I couldn't run very fast. And the coach decided to put me in the half mile, which is just brutal when you've never done it before. and and I did it, and it was brutal. I almost died. It was horrible, especially in a race, because then you think you run. But he saw that I did less bad than in everything else. So, long story short, I became a runner, a long distance runner, and a competitive long distance runner, and that brought me outside. I became somebody who had to run every day, miles and miles every day, and I was outside, and I really appreciated it. I love a good trail. I love being in the woods, running up these hills where you're the only one, and I don't run now, but I bike, and it's the same kind of thing. It's just you're being outside, the expanse. You see the sky, you see the trees, whatever foliage is around you, and kind of become one with it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hmm. So when you experience that sense of being part of the landscape, as much as the tree and the clouds and the dirt on the trail, and that you are part of that, what what occurs inside of you? How would you, if you can, put words to that?
Uh, wow, it's a flow. I call it like I'm in a flow, particularly because of the running.
Mm,
There's a flow that happens
mhm,
there. Uh, I'm I feel the air. I'm at one with what's around me. That's another way to think about it.
mhm,
Uh, I'm present. I'm engaged, and I'm. It's also a joy. It's
yeah.
it's a it's a joy. Hmm.
Mm, mm, mm. Just hearing you describe that deep inside me just kind of is and just relaxes into that way of being.
Hmm.
It's like it sounds like a meditation for you.
It is. It is. Matter
Mhm.
of fact, later in life, I
Mhm.
I I did a Vipassana meditation. Actually, I did three of them, 10-day retreats.
Mhm.
And the first one I went to, I met one of the assistant teachers. You don't talk at all during it, so it's not until the very end that you actually can talk. But I found out he had been a runner too, and I said, "Yeah, this reminds me of running. You're
Ah.
sitting for this extent, but you're sitting. You're not moving. You're
Mhm.
sitting, but you're not. That's part of it. An hour of sitting, your
Mhm.
body is just like doing the same kind of thing that would happen in a strenuous run. It's kind of amazing, and the feeling is similar. The feeling is
Mhm.
similar.
Mhm.
That's on the physical side. There's also the whole mental spiritual side. I think of meditation, which bears a lot of resemblance to going on a run because it is. You're in a flow. You're doing the same thing for a long period of time. It's motion in that case, whereas
Mhm.
meditation I did was sitting.
Mhm.
But there's so many similarities.
Mhm. Mhm. There's a shift of mm, relationship with everything, that there's a shift of consciousness.
Yes.
Mhm. And expanding out as part of the really big picture.
Yes, I would definitely say that.
Hmm. Just pausing for a moment to appreciate that. I mean, it's almost as if there's a willingness to surrender to that bigger picture of the outdoors, of being part. I don't use the word nature in third person because we're part of that, and so um that recognition, like remembering, oh, this is all kin, we're all kin here.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah.
So Dan, how would you say that your relationship with the outdoors has has had impact on your values and how you show up in the world and what's important to you?
Mm, yeah. Definitely the idea of sustainability. It comes,
Mm,
I think, comes from that. And as I mentioned, my mom hanging clothes outside. There's the outside. There's the not using energy when you have this energy that's out here, the sunlight
yeah, yeah.
that can dry your clothes, and you don't have to, run electricity to do the same thing.
Hmm.
Uh, that's certainly a part of it. And it- I think running and seeing nature and it kind of I can go intellectual and think, okay, why is this here? But I
Hmm.
can also go deeper than that and think, well, it's here. What about it? Almost
Oh.
asking it a question,
Hmm.
and rather than asking why is it here, what made it come, and getting it's almost
Hmm.
superficial, staying in the
Hmm.
head. How can I
Hmm.
go deeper and really notice at a deeper level, what is this tree?
Hmm.
What is this rock? What is this trail? What am I,
Mm.
for that matter?
Mhm.
But not in an
Mhm.
intellectual sense.
Mm.
And I think that definitely was a part of my growth, and it didn't happen overnight. It's still happening. Uh, Having kind of that interest and engagement that's beyond the intellectual. I,
Mm.
and I think that that has come with all of this over time.
Mm. Mm. It's a whole different way of being in relationship rather than the person analytical to more of a relational leaning in to what is it like to be you
Yeah.
and that what like to be a tree and then
Hmm.
but listening deep inside.
Right. Right.
Mm.
Interestingly, as a scientist, that's not how I was trained. I wasn't even trained as a scientist. I was trained as an engineer, which is even further from that. Yeah, it's like staying in my head. So there is a part of me that likes to go into my head, and I go there a
Mhm.
lot, a
Mhm.
lot. And I bet
Mhm.
I enjoy it. I like going there,
Mhm. Mhm.
puzzling with things, trying to really
Mhm.
tear them apart, rip them apart, get to the,
Mhm.
intellectual understanding, and
Yes.
and can I do this? Can I build this? Can I make this?
Yes. Yes.
So there's a tension for me between the two of them.
Mhm.
Tension may be the wrong word, but there's a
It's
push pull.
dynamic.
Yeah.
Dynamic. Yes.
Hmm.
Yes.
Hmm.
Have dynamic brain hemispheres. There's that interaction that's going on between the right and left hemispheres, both
Definitely.
firing. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. So I'm curious as you're listening to whether it's trees or birds or fog, if,
Hmm.
if what do you receive? What do you hear? What comes to you through that listening?
Sometimes I get an understanding that I wasn't looking for, uh, and it
Mm,
doesn't necessarily happen right then. It might happen the next day. It's like, oh, I realize this now. And what I love is
mm,
when there's an interplay between the sensory and the deeper level of listening, and then the conscious analytical, and I get an
mm-hmm,
insight like, oh my gosh, I wonder if this is da da da. And so I'm kind of an intellectual, but it went down into the feeling state. That's where I got the information from, and
yeah,
it may go back and forth. Something
yes,
intellectual may then go into the feeling state, enter my dreams or something else, and so
mm-hmm,
it's not all one or the other. So I think that's one way that's exciting. It's an exciting way of learning.
mm-hmm,
As I think, I mean, I'm an educator. I think about learning a lot. I teach physics for goodness sake, and you know, I I see students who struggle with the constant sitting here in the intellectual, which is
mm-hmm,
what a lot of teaching and education, unfortunately, has traditionally resided in,
yeah,
and that learning can happen in a deeper place and enhance what's going on up here.
mm-hmm,
But we tend to stick up here and say, "Oh, can you solve
mm-hmm,
this equation? You can't. Okay, let me show you the steps." That's great.
mm-hmm,
It's great. It's very
mm-hmm,
superficial.
mm-hmm,
Let's go
mm-hmm,
deeper. What's
mm-hmm,
going on with you when we're looking at this equation?
mm-hmm,
Why, there may be some old trauma. There may be something else that the educator's
right,
not even thinking about that's affecting why a student can or can't
mm,
engage in something.
mm, mm. Again, there's that systems perspective coming through that this isn't a monolith or just one element, that there are many elements in the system of students or of teaching. And the more of those elements that you can touch, then the more integrated that things things can emerge from an integrated system rather than one.
Exactly.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm, mm. Goofy thing just popped in my mind I remember because I grew up in the 50s and it the I remember when stereo came out, before it was just one speaker and then stereo came out and then surround sound, and all of this that just brought so many more, the music became so much more alive because you could hear all of the nuances and all of the more subtle vibrations.
Right.
Mm,
Right.
mhm, mhm, yeah. So when I'm going to pull some elements together here. So there was your first, you referenced your first retreat and the affinity and enjoyment that you have of figuring things out.
Hmm.
And and then that attunement or that paying attention to sensory things. And I wonder if you would be willing to share the how you came to on that retreat. There were some things that happened on that retreat that actually led you into your interest with fog and the dynamics of what happens with fog and air and all. And I wonder if you would be willing to share that
Oh,
story.
of course. Yeah.
It brings it all together.
It really does. Yeah,
Mhm,
it was very that first retreat, that first meditation retreat I attended was very hot. It's in the Sierra, not even foothills. It's kind of the mid hills, I would say. It's an hour out of Fresno, the direct center of the state of California. If you could draw a
mhm.
pin on the map, that's the location of the retreat center.
Wow.
And it's in the summer that I had the retreat. They go year round, of course, with COVID now. I
Mhm,
don't think they're having them in person. They have some sort of remote thing, which I'm sure is effective, but it's different.
mhm,
Uh, but the uh, retreat it was very hot and was full, so there was no room. They have dorms there. It's an amazing
mhm,
system that they have set up that
mhm,
it's on donation completely, so people don't pay
mhm,
to go there. At the end of the retreat, they donate whatever they feel is
mhm,
appropriate. And that's
mhm,
been an incredible model for them. They've grown and grown because people have thought it's been so beneficial. They benefit. They donate what they can. Some very little, some
mhm.
quite a bit, and it's
Yes.
been enough to grow this whole practice
Yes.
worldwide. There's many dozens, if not I don't know if about hundreds, but many dozens of retreat centers worldwide, born completely on this model.
Mm.
But in any case, there was no room in the dorms, which do have air conditioning.
Yes.
So I was in a tent, and I brought a tent. I knew that. I brought my own tent and was out in the tent. But the tent's in the sun. It gets hot,
Yeah.
and the meditation is done in a meditation Dhamma hall, is what it's called. This hall where
Mhm,
we go and spend a lot of time meditating. But when we're not meditating, those few hours when we're not meditating, some of them are during the night when we're sleeping. It's not as hot then. That was fine. But some of them are during the day. And I tell you, when you're sitting 10 hours of meditation a day, when I'm not sitting, I want to be asleep. Even for 20 minutes, I can go to sleep and get up when the
mhm,
gong rings and go and
mhm,
meditate again. But I felt like I needed every moment to sleep. You're not
mhm,
able to read, you're not able to talk.
mhm,
I mean, the things to do are to walk around the nature of the area, which is beautiful, and I did that. And they purposefully are put in natural areas with trees and
mhm,
surroundings to really reinforce our connection with nature. But when I'm not doing that and you're not eating the one or two small meals you eat a day, you're resting, or at least
mhm,
reclining, and that was
mhm,
the place to do that, and it was hot. It was hot. It was in the sun, it was hot, and I'm thinking, "Oh, gosh, how can I cool this tent down?"
mhm,
And there was water. Fortunately, it wasn't like there wasn't any water there. There was access
mhm,
to water, and so I brought water and put it in a bucket and thought I'll pour it on the tent. That's great, but it just runs off and and I thought, "Oh, I'll put a towel on top of the tent. If I put a towel on top of the tent, I'll get some shade at least." And
mhm,
yeah, a little bit, but it didn't help. It was still brutally hot in there.
mhm,
Then I thought, I'll take a wet towel and put it on the tent. So I poured water on the towel, stuck it on the tent, and then when the towel evaporates, it cools a little bit, and that cools the tent. And quite honestly,
mhm,
that's the principle behind a swamp cooler. That's how swamp coolers work.
mhm, mhm,
those are the air conditioning devices that a lot of the other dorms had anyway, just done in a
Yes.
more uh, comprehensive way. And that one took electricity. Mine just took the heat that was bothering me and caused that water to evaporate.
Mhm.
But then I started thinking about water and the fact that Monterey has always struggled with water issues,
Mhm.
and and we also had a lot of fog. I thought, oh,
Mhm.
fog. And of course, at that point, I didn't know really much about fog.
Mhm.
Was not a fog researcher yet. I was an
Mhm.
electrical engineer, is what I studied. But I was thinking, fog. I wonder if there's some way to get that water from fog. I wonder if anybody's ever done that. And my
Mhm.
mind started. Then my mind started going. It was kind of
Yeah.
funny because I started thinking, I wonder if I'll be famous. If I Nobody's thought of this before, right? It's a new thing. Wow, Dan, and so my mind started going on this ego ride
Mhm.
for the
Mhm.
next few days of the retreat when I wasn't in meditation. Probably sometimes when I was in meditation, it did. It's like it kind of
Mhm.
became obsessive, and I thought
Mhm.
when I get home, I'm gonna check this out.
Mhm.
And when I did get home after the retreat ended, and uh, I got back home, I went online and found out that people have been thinking about this for centuries. It's not a new thing. It's been happening. And there's actually a
Mhm.
nonprofit set up in Canada that was doing this, that was
Oh.
collecting fog. It was called Fog Quest. I was like, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
well, disappointing, yes, but there's expertise. And so the
Yes.
person from Fog Quest, who I still work with, he's a professional colleague now. He
Mm.
told me, yeah, this is how we do it, and he went through it. And now it became over years my area of research. This is 15, actually maybe more than that, 17 years ago that
Mm.
this whole thing happened.
Mm.
And now I'm a fog researcher. I have my own equipment deployed, certainly in the state of California, but other parts of the world as well.
Wow.
And I attend international fog conferences. I write papers. I review papers. So
Mhm.
it all started at that meditation retreat, that
Wow.
interaction between the thinking and the observing and feeling, and it led to
Mhm.
this.
Mm. Mm. Again, that seed of discomfort. I mean, that that goes all the way back to when you were little, and just that little itch of what's this about, or what's the purpose here, and so that seed of discomfort from the heat and trying to have some relief of that just catalyzed this whole mm, series of events that became part of your career.
Oh yeah. I can't
Mm.
tell you the number of colleagues I now met and know because of that, who I wouldn't
Wow.
have met and known otherwise. And the
Yes.
many students I've had, over 50, probably close to 60 students at some point. Actually, my classes hear about it. So hundreds of students are impacted
Mhm.
by that
Mhm.
event through me.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not much,
Mm.
maybe in some
Mhm.
cases more.
Mhm.
Who knows?
Mhm.
But how things kind of ripple out, they may
Yes.
touch somebody and they may not remember it. Others will be like, oh my gosh,
Yes.
that affected me in a big way.
That's right. That's
Hmm.
right. Yes, and especially as an educator, that you know some of the ripples, but my guess is you have no idea of the how far the ripples go, and all the different levels that are touched.
Right. For instance, just the other day, somebody from a school in Virginia, a librarian at a school in Virginia, called and said, "Hey, could you do a presentation to 500 kids at this bilingual school?" Because they're all remote. They want,
Right.
to talk to a scientist. I'm like, sure, this sounds like a great thing. And
Hmm.
that kind of thing happens a lot. So,
Yes.
I mean, every few weeks I get an email message saying, "Can you tell me about fog?" Because I started a
Hmm.
business to
Hmm.
help others who want to do fog work. So
Mm,
I'm a place people go to ask about this.
mm, mm. And that's I mean, again, the interconnection of taking something that occurs naturally in the world and engaging with it in a way that doesn't it's not depleting, it's just resource, it's resourcing it,
Right. Right.
resourcing as in pulling from, but it's just diverting it to a different purpose.
Right. And that actually can be a slippery slope. I probably ought to say it can be because how
Mhm.
many times have we thought that, in
Mhm.
drilling oil or whatever? And I often
Mhm.
get the question, hey, if you're taking fog out of the air, are you depriving those
Mm.
trees and those other plants and
Mhm.
animals that need it? And that's a
Mhm.
valid question.
Mhm.
Um, and I can give plenty of answers why that's not the case.
Mhm.
Immediately, yes, you do. But fog that isn't collected by something re-evaporates.
Right.
So it literally goes back into the atmosphere.
Yes.
And if you want to
Yes.
look at it from the perspective of climate change,
Yes.
water vapor is an incredibly it's it is one of the most potent greenhouse gases.
Yes.
It's more
Yes.
than CO2. We can't control it though. CO2 we can control, water vapor we
Yes.
can't. So if
Yes.
I'm preventing a little bit of that water vapor from going back in the atmosphere and using it,
Mhm.
collecting it and using it for some purpose, in a
Mhm.
sense, I'm doing a service.
Mhm. 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 Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Is like zooming out and looking at, you know, the inputs and the outputs and you know, what's the effect on the stock in the middle and to maintain the balance. It's not that one is better than the other. It's about the balance and
Yes.
maintaining the balance. And so I'm wondering how that plays into your I know that you're also very, very dedicated to sustainability and working with communities and bringing students into communities to again taking that systemic approach to looking at how can we maintain balance in communities. And I wonder, I just would like to hear a little bit more about that work, and particularly again how you bring the outdoors into that work, or how the outdoors figures as part of that system that you're looking at.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Uh, Fog, I mean, I'll start with fog. Fog
Mhm.
is obviously it's an outdoor phenomenon. I have to be
Mhm.
outdoors to research it, which is
Yes.
great. It puts me
Mhm.
outdoors. I didn't think about that when I was getting into this, but it's
Um,
another connection
yes.
to being outdoors. And fog, it's funny because when people think sustainability and they think fog, they often put them together, and they are
Mhm.
related. They are
Mhm.
related. The fog that we have, of course, it's a resource, as you alluded to, and I talked about too, that fog can potentially, the water from fog can be something that can be used and has been used. A
Mhm.
village in Chile that used it for 9 years completely.
Mhm.
They lived
Mm.
on fog water rather than trucking in water from elsewhere.
Mhm.
So it's possible to do that. There's villages in Morocco that are currently trying to do the same thing. Uh,
Mm.
Several of them with a much even larger array of fog collectors there that are being used to collect water for these villages.
Mm.
It's possible to do that, but what's also interesting is fog is a natural phenomenon that is being affected by climate change.
Mm.
Some places, I think, some places may get more, some places may get less, but I know along the coast of California that the general belief, although we don't have enough data to conclusively show along the coast here, but I, I have seen worldwide studies that are showing reduced levels of fog in general as a result of climate change,
Mhm.
because fog is dependent upon an interaction between colder air and warmer air. And when you
Mhm.
change that dynamic, you change where
Mhm.
and how the fog occurs.
Mhm.
So fog in and of itself, it's in some ways it's almost I would say canary in the coal mine, but
Mhm.
it's one of many things. I mean, look at the fires.
Mhm.
There's so many things that are affected
Yeah.
by climate change. Fog is one of them. So it connects to that idea of sustainability in
Mhm.
many ways. One is it can be a resource. Another is
Mhm.
it can be an indicator of what is the climate doing to our
Mhm.
surroundings. And there are plants and animals that depend on the fog, whether it's the water from the fog or uh, the environment associated with foggy areas that are cooler because of the fog.
Mhm.
It provides a layer, a
Mhm.
cooler layer in many cases,
Mhm.
uh, that are can be therefore impacted by climate change because the fog patterns are changing.
Mhm.
So, a lot of these. there's a lot of overlap between fog research and climate change.
Mm, mm. Yeah.
And I'll also say another
Mm,
thing too.
mhm.
Fog research has led me a number of different directions. One is also human health, which, I mean, climate change, how is that affecting people? When
Yeah.
the climate changes, there are farm workers who are very adversely affected because they
Yes.
have to work in the heat. They are outside,
Mhm,
whether they want to or not, and whether their bodies can handle it or not as they get older.
mhm,
It's a huge social issue,
mm.
and fog also can carry around agriculture. There's a lot of social issues that come up in terms of
Right.
who are the ones doing the work in the
Mhm,
field, who are the people
mhm,
doing the work, and how are they affected? And how are they affected by what chemicals are being added? And so there's a lot of questions that come up. And also fog is in there too, because especially on the California coast, which is this considered the salad bowl of the world, along the Salinas
mhm,
Valley, fog goes in there. Well, what
mhm,
is the fog? How is it affecting the agriculture in terms of the moisture? But not only that, are there chemicals in the fog that are
mhm,
transporting things from one place to another, depending on
mhm,
what certain farmer is doing on one farm? Is that affecting somebody on another farm?
mhm,
Is it
mhm.
affecting the workers? Is the
Right.
fog actually a vector? Is it carrying
Yes.
things that we may not think about offhand?
Mhm,
And it
mhm,
does. It can carry
mhm,
things. We see it. We see
mhm,
elements of different things that the fog can carry. So I'm currently I'm the principal investigator on a research grant from the National Institute of Health, actually,
mm,
Science Education Partnership Award. Uh,
mm.
and I'm working with several leaders in human health in the area who've been studying impacts on farm workers of various
Ah,
practices. Longitudinal study of like 20 years looking at farm worker children and how they've been affected
mm,
by
mhm.
some of these chemicals. They're going to be working with me on, it's a 5-year grant. On year 4, we're looking at fog, but we're also looking at
Wow.
climate change and we're looking at plastics and how does that impact human health. And like you're
Mm,
saying, in terms of systems, all of these things are interrelated. Climate
yes.
change, plastics, fog,
Mhm,
they
mhm,
affect one another and they affect
mhm.
us in different
Yes.
ways.
Yes. Yes. As we are affected, then that affects everything else. And so this old story of isolation and infinite supply and everybody's just kind of out for themselves, that just needs to go.
It
Because
really does. It really
just
does.
not true.
No, no.
And
It's fascinating though, Marian, that you bring that up. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I also think of the development of a child, a baby.
mhm,
Yeah,
mhm,
and as a therapist, I'm sure you've studied
mhm.
this. My wife's a therapist. She tells me
Yes,
about it all the time, and I'm
yes.
constantly learning from her. But as babies, you know, we are dependent upon everything, and everything is about us, but we can't communicate that. But they're not
Mhm.
thinking about the baby next door. They're not thinking about their parents. They're crying, and you got to go take care
Mhm,
of them. They're not thinking, "Oh, I don't
mhm.
want to cry right now because my
That's
parents might get upset." No,
that's
they're crying because that's what they knew how to do. That's all they
mhm.
know how to do. They knew how
Asking
to,
for what they
yeah,
need.
they're asking
Yes.
for what they need. And then as they get older, you get, they will come what the terrible twos, which is kind of mean. It's
Mhm.
that's how we feel, but these are kids learning their boundaries, learning that they're not the
Yes.
only one, but we start being self-centered. That's how
Yes.
we're come into the world. But it only goes
Mhm.
so far. I mean, by the time you're 5, 6, 7, you're
Mhm.
learning that you're not the only one. You get to share your toys, you have to share your food.
Mhm.
We have
Mhm.
to work together or else things
Mhm.
fall apart. Yes, as a
Yes.
baby, we have to surround you. As a
Mhm.
toddler, we have to surround you. But as you get
Mhm.
older, you start to learn um, uh, that you're part of a whole community. You are not the only one, and that's a painful
Yes.
learning process. But I think as a society, we have to learn the same thing. Uh,
Right.
it's not just about me. It's
Mhm.
not just about
Mhm.
me. How
Mhm.
do I work with others? How do I bring others into the
Mhm.
picture? It's a full system. We all work together.
Right.
And if not, it's a short-term win.
Right.
It's not the long run. It's the
Mm-mm.
short run that maybe I'll win, but I'll lose and I'll lose hard later.
Yes. 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 And and the paradox of we are creatures who have a need for belonging. We are mammals, so having that sense of connection is essential for our emotional and physical and spiritual well-being.
Right.
Yeah. So again, that sort of dynamic system of individual and community, um, it plays out so that there's difference. It's actually not a problem. It's just having the differences in balance, and that there's room for all of those, um, to create the healthy system. Create
Right.
the system.
Right. Exactly.
Mm. I'm really glad, Dan, you have your eye on this. That you are, that with the looking at the food and the human beings and the 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 water and the plants. I mean that looking at how they are all essential parts of everything and everybody living, and not just surviving, but actually living and thriving. That when the system is balanced and diverse, that's when there's thriving and everything gets nourished.
Right. Right. Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Mm, mm. So, what do you know or feel about the outdoors that you wish everybody knew or felt?
Hmm. It's a great question. I do want to say
Mhm.
one thing about the outdoors,
Yes,
which I always find,
yes,
and then I'll get to your question,
yes, yes.
and that is, historically, the outdoors was not always the refuge. When we think about uh, our forebears, maybe to
Mhm,
some groups more than others,
mhm,
but I know at least the European
mhm,
centric
mhm,
viewpoint was more like, oh, the outdoors is often something to be afraid of. Not now so
mhm,
much,
mhm,
maybe a little
mhm,
bit now, but more so, the folks who are the Europeans who first, when the Europeans came to this country, and it's
mhm,
like, the forest is a dangerous place.
mhm,
We need to tame it. We might get
mhm,
killed out
mhm,
there. We need
mhm.
to build, we need to create our communities, which is understandable, but it was done at the cost of nature.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until much more recently that we realized, oh my gosh, nature's where we came from. It's our refuge,
Yes.
really. It's the place we need
Yes.
to be.
Yes.
And so I think we started seeing that shift, in
Mhm.
the past, in waves. It comes,
Yes.
some people have it, others maybe less so.
Right.
But that connection is so important to our beings and our health.
Mhm.
And I'll have to have you remind me of the question, because I was getting to it, but that it reminded me of that history. But if you can remind me of the question, I'll get to that.
What do you know or feel about words that you wish everyone knew or felt?
Great. What do I know or feel? That it's rejuvenating. It is
Mm.
rejuvenating. I I
Mhm.
I mean, I could talk a lot about it, but if
Yeah.
there's a single word, I would say rejuvenating.
Yes.
If I'm stressed, if I'm not feeling well, and I'm inside, I'm even opening the window, which I'm going to do right now. It's a little cold
Uh-huh.
out, maybe, but
Uh-huh.
the fresh
Uh-huh.
air, I feel it. It's like it,
Yes.
it makes a difference. That's part of the outside coming
Yes.
in.
Yes.
It's circulation. It brings some of that in. I'll go out later. I'll walk my dog. I'll maybe
Mm.
go on a bike ride. I'll get
Mhm.
outside, and
Yes.
I come back, and it's almost like I'm a different person. If
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah.
a little bit of me has changed. It's gone back
Mhm.
to maybe where it belongs once I come back.
Mhm.
So it is
Mhm.
rejuvenating. It is,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm appreciating you're using that word rejuvenating. I actually want to look at the etymology of juvenating. What is getting reactivated,
Mm,
rejuvenated. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. I think about I've personally, and I've seen it with other people too, who spend time outdoors, not not necessarily doing something, but just letting themselves be outdoors and letting the world show itself to them. And primarily, coming in through the different senses rather than the naming all of the different species and stuff, but actually, again, being in relationship and I've heard it described as I feel like I've come home or something has
Yeah.
home. There's a return to something that we forgot have forgotten. And
Right.
and
Hmm.
then but when that is touched, then we feel touched by that. And so that's the rejuvenation. But I'm going to look up the etymology of that word because that's
Great.
beautiful.
When you said that, I thought of, juve, so it's like juvenile, young. So it's
Yes,
like becoming young again,
young
maybe.
again.
I'm just guessing.
Yes,
I don't know.
yes, yes. That definitely. Yeah. And so from what you know and what you don't know, um, what are the seeds that you would like to plant for the future?
Hmm. I would say there's a few. I like how you said from what I know and what I don't know, because
Mm-hmm.
it implies that we all need to always be educating
Yeah.
ourselves, including me. I'm always learning.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm
Mm-hmm.
not learning, then I feel like I'm kind of on a downhill.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I'm going down. It's like I
Yeah.
constantly learning, and
Yes.
so that's part of what I don't know. And so
Mm-hmm.
the idea is to be always be a learner and to be
Mm-hmm.
curious. Can I
Mm-hmm.
be curious? And and I think there's that fine line between curiosity and particularly these days, curiosity and judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Judging those who don't know or who think differently from myself.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly now, that's a very big challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the idea of always being curious, if there's something that I don't know or I don't like, or something somebody says that I don't like, how can I uh, be curious? So rather,
Yeah.
but also ask them about it, not back away from it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
I think that's an important thing right now in these days. I think most people think, yes, we want a better world.
Mm-hmm.
Most, not all. Most think
Mm-hmm.
that. The question is,
Mm-hmm.
what path or what route are we taking to get there? And we may see
Mm-hmm.
very differently what that route is.
Yes.
Some may say we need to drill for oil.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel that way. That's not the
Mm-hmm.
direction I would want to go.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that's going to lead to a better world.
Mm-hmm.
So, but there are some who may think that way. So
Mm-hmm.
those conversations can also get really difficult because they're so
Mm-hmm.
charged nowadays.
Yes.
So I would say, and then the conversation also is very, it's in the head.
Yeah.
We're all in our heads when we're having those
Mm-hmm.
conversations. How
Mm-hmm.
do we get down into, okay, I'm experiencing this right now. That's where a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
reality is in the
Mm-hmm.
conversation. And it's
Mm-hmm.
harder to have that conversation, but
Mm-hmm.
exploring that, trying to be with
Mm-hmm.
that,
Mm-hmm.
I would say is what I strive to do. And I'm not there yet,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but I'm working on it.
Mm-hmm. 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 I can feel you working on it.
Yeah.
And the word curious, I mean, and that being such a key word for you and I think it's a key word in relationship because when we're curious about something, we naturally lean in
Hmm.
and we're more awake and a little bit more mm, listening or feeling or seeing deeper. Whereas if we think we know, we're not curious, then and we're working for assumptions, then that's almost a leaning back or a judgment, well, I know what's really true here. And so there's a leaning back and that keeps us out of relationship. I mean, we're all totally in relationship with ourselves, but we're not necessarily in relationship with this other being, whether it's human or a more than human being.
Right. And sometimes I question my relationship with my or anybody's relationship with their self because I think I
Yes,
am, but when
yes.
look a little more deeply. I actually wasn't. I was thinking in this level, and I need to go kind of go down here.
Yes,
So
yes,
even when I
yeah,
think I'm in relationship with myself, sometimes I have to dig a little deeper there and be curious about my own internal process.
absolutely, absolutely. And that's where the meditation, whether it's sitting or running, but where everything gets quiet so you actually can sense.
Hmm.
Because the deeper, my experience, that the deeper generally speaks in a very soft voice. It's this is really loud or really free.
Yeah.
But the deeper really speaks in a soft voice. And for me anyway, silence. And it doesn't mean silence like no sound. It just means silence like no noise of to really hear that soft, that softer speaking from below.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And I appreciate too your pointing to for us human beings to find a way to listen to each other and to have conversation rather than debate, which is of different concepts, but to actually, um, yeah, and it goes back to that. What is it like to be you? That question, or how do you get to that point of view? And when we start listening to those things, whether it's we should drill more oil or not drill more oil, what is better. I mean, those are pathways. It's not actually what is wanted to have a sense of security and well-being, um, and creativity and purpose. That's universal.
Right. Right.
Yeah, but we that's the deeper part that hopefully we're learning. We're certainly called to access that
Yes.
way of being together.
Definitely.
Yeah, yeah. And in a way, when I think about a forest or the ocean, that's kind of how that works. The tree's not saying, well, to some other thing, well, that you really should grow straight and tall and reach up. It actually needs what's underground to help it thrive. And so that working together. Mm,
That's right.
mm. So, as a last question or last pondering invitation to ponder, um, what is your wish for Earth?
My wish for Earth?
Uh-huh. We've talked about your wish for people. What is your
Hmm.
wish for the Earth?
Wow. Well, I think the two in some ways go together because we
Mm-hmm.
are part of Earth,
That's right.
and the Earth the Earth's going to keep going,
Yeah.
whether we do or not. The Earth's going to
Mm-hmm.
keep going. It'll be different, be
Mm-hmm.
much different without us,
Mm-hmm.
but it'll do what it's going to do, and life will continue in
Mm-hmm.
different ways,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll evolve into something else.
Mm-hmm.
So, my wish for the Earth is that it can remain a place that is a place that we humans and the other creatures who currently live on the Earth will continue to uh, be able to flourish as best we can, as best we can,
Mm-hmm.
and that the changes that happen on the Earth won't be sudden. I think that's part of
Mm-hmm.
it. I think humans, what we're doing right now is a sudden thing. We're kind of putting a hammer to it, and
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
there's this when you pound something with a hammer, it kind of vibrates and resonates, and
Mm-hmm.
well, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily resonates. It vibrates, and
Mm-hmm.
it's disturbing. It's disturbing,
Yes.
and
Yes.
disturbing are things that happen on timescales of even a century. That's disturbing.
Mhm.
When I say
Mhm.
disturbing, it affects everything that's on the planet. And so we humans, with our short vision of a few weeks, maybe a year, we forget
Mhm.
what it was like 5, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But those things impact us. So my
Mhm.
hope for the Earth is smoothness, maybe, and not
Mm.
a sudden jerk, which is going to
Mhm.
lurch
Mhm.
us from where we sit
Mhm.
within a time scale um,
Mhm.
that is going to affect our children and their children.
Mm. Mm. that we actually can live in Earth time, in geologic time, that it's slow. It's very slow. Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, our
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle is fast. I mean, even though I'm at
Mm-hmm.
home, I have
Mm-hmm.
this like, oh, got to get this done. I mean, there's
Mm-hmm.
something about that is
Yeah.
this fast pace, and it's interesting. This
Mm-hmm.
fast versus geologic slow could
Yeah.
seem boring. It could seem
Mm-hmm.
boring. And how do
Mm-hmm.
we wrestle with that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
wrestling with geologic time, I'd say might be a
I really like that image. I mean, that would be like a slow-mo wrestling.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Oh, Dan. Yay. I've really enjoyed our conversation and connection. So, speaking of connection, if folks would like to get in touch with you and to learn more about your sustainability projects or teachings, or just how would folks get in touch with you?
Email is probably the best way. I get a lot of emails, so
Yeah.
maybe putting something in the title saying something like s'more follow-up, then I'd know, oh, this is from that. So,
uh
so that's a quick way. Oh, this is from that because I get so
yes.
much email, I
Yes.
often don't know what it's about.
Right.
Sometimes it's about fog. I can tell the fog ones because they usually say something about, question about
Mm-hmm.
fog or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But if it was like, some more follow on, then I'll know, oh, okay, they must have listened to this and they're interested in that.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I like that sort of like having a password to get
Right.
Clubhouse. Some more. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. Right. Well, again, I want to thank you so much for your stories, and also thank you. I know that you have offered a gift to our listeners, the folks who are interested, a gift of the construction manual to build one's own fog collector. And
Right.
so, thank you
Mm-hmm.
very much for that. And I will be um, notifying people how to request that if 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 they would like. It just
Great.
I love that idea. Yes. Uh,
Good.
so again, I've very much enjoyed our connection.
Pleasure. Thank you. I enjoyed talking to you. Always a
Mm.
pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, thank you, Dan. Thank you. So I'm going to close here. If you'll just stay with me for a
Mhm.
couple more minutes. Um, More Stories is an offering of Monterey Bay Meditation Studio in service of cultivating relationship of reverence and reciprocity with the outdoors. This relationship arises as we recognize our profound connection with the planet that we live on and the universe of which we are part. For more information about this series or courses or the community of Monterey Bay Meditation Studio, please go to montereybaymeditation.com or check out our YouTube channel for additional recordings in this series. And as a closing quote, I'd like to offer a quote by one of Dan's former teachers of physics, one of his inspirations in this field, Richard Feynman, who said, "The science knowledge only adds to the excitement, the mystery, and the awe of a flower." From the campfire under the night sky, this is Marianne Rowe, wishing you warmth, some more sweetness, and awe. Thank you for joining us.
Great. You got it?
Oh,